unbelievable to watch that thing happen.
Line's gone, sir. Two more have been spotted over the Atlantic. One's moving toward New York, the other's headed this direction.
How much time do we have?
Less than 10 minutes.
Alex, organize a military escort to President.
Judy, thanks very much. Joined here on this set by Miles O'Brien, who is our resident pilot and certainly has quite a bit of understanding about the wheres and why-fors and what significance they might have in putting together what happened. Miles has some additional information now, and that's really important to understanding who might have done this and why.
Well, this is...
Line's gone, sir. Two more have been spotted over the Atlantic. One's moving toward New York, the other's headed this direction.
Sort of our first clue as to what's going on. Obviously, more information will come out as the air traffic control tapes and hopefully the cockpit voice recordings come out. But just take a look at this. This is actual archival information from the radar tracks from the FAA ground centers. And these are the two planes which ultimately ended up at the World Trade Centers, the two towers. Both of them left Boston within 15 minutes of each other. Both were headed to Los Angeles, perhaps no coincidence, heavily laden with fuel. Both of them made extreme and noticeable deviations and were heading in the wrong direction for 30, perhaps 40 minutes, thus clearly giving air traffic controllers quite a bit of attention. There must have been some communication back and forth. It's unclear now.
This is certainly something the air traffic control folks would have seen. They would have seen these things
clearly.
coming up, folks.
And the fact that two planes were doing this must have seemed odd. We don't know what the conversations were, but suffice to say that would be odd. Now take a look at
Line's gone, sir. Two more have been spotted over the Atlantic. One's moving toward New York, the other's headed this direction.
This flight, this is United 93. This took off from Dulles Airport, was headed for San Francisco. Once again, a coast-to-coast flight, heavily laden with fuel, flew on out from Newark to about Cleveland, then took its dogleg, was headed pretty much to the D.C. area, and then disappeared off the radar screens right here outside of the Pittsburgh area, a place called Shanksville. We don't know what happened there. What's kind of odd about this one, Joey, is that at some point after flying past Pittsburgh, the pilot apparently radioed and changed his destination to DCA, which is Ronald Reagan National Airport. Unclear what that means. Now let me just kind of put this all onto one graphic, if you will. If we can put up that graphic, and I'll use the telestrator to show you exactly what's going on.
Line's gone, sir. Two more have been spotted over the Atlantic. One's moving toward New York, the other's headed this direction.
Right, here are the important cities. First of all, let's take a look at 8 a.m. and see what happens at 8 a.m. And that was the first departure, okay? This is a flight, American Airlines Flight 11, was headed out this way to Los Angeles, 81 passengers, 11 crew member. Now, 8:15, United Flight 175 heads out a little different route across, also headed for Los Angeles. That was at 8:15. 8:21 a.m., Dulles Airport is your location, and that is American Airlines Flight 77, a 757, 58 passengers and crew. It headed off onto Los Angeles. We don't have a radar track on this, so I'm doing a little bit of speculation there. Finally, United Airlines Flight 93 at 8:43 as it departs Newark Airport and begins its trip all the way over to Cleveland. Now, let's get the impact times here. 8:45, the flight, American Airlines Flight 11, impacts in New York at the World Trade Center. 9:03, the United Flight 175 impacts at the World Trade Center. 9:45 a.m., and of course all these times are Eastern times, the flight, American Airlines flight that was headed from Dulles to Dulles to Los Angeles, hits at the excuse me, I should have been drawing that to New York. I was drawing it to Washington. Hits at the Pentagon. My apologies on that. And then finally, United Air Flight 93 ends up in outside of Pittsburgh. That made a bit of a hash there, but that gives you a sense of how well coordinated this was and how sophisticated an operation this was. A couple of points to remember. The fact that if you can fly a 757, you can fly a 767, identical cockpits, so if you were training somebody to fly that aircraft, they're more or less interchangeable.
Plane's gone, sir. 2 more have been spotted over the Atlantic. One's moving toward New York, the other's headed this direction.
But the point that is worth mentioning here is you had 4 large airliners on transcontinental flights with extreme deviations. The air traffic control system clearly was upset by this. I'm very curious to hear what they have to say about the radio transmissions and whether at some point the big picture was ever analyzed. It's done by individual centers. Maybe the big picture wasn't analyzed.
Miles O'Brien, our correspondent, thanks very much for your insight into all this. Now we return to Aaron Brown up in New York.
President, I strongly recommend we move you to a secure location immediately.
Connie, can we expect the same kind of panic we saw in Russia?
More than likely. Mr. President, we can discuss this on the way.
I'm not leaving.
We have to maintain a working government.
I want you to get the Vice President, the whole cabinet, and Joint Chiefs and take them to a secured location.
Vice President Dick Cheney and First Lady Laura Bush are in undisclosed secure locations tonight. Mrs. Bush is
it. We began to implement it immediately after the first attack in New York this morning. We contacted American forces and embassies throughout the world and placed them on high alert. The United States Secret Service immediately secured the President, the Vice President, and the Speaker of the House, and they are all safe. They have also secured members of the National Security Team, the President's Cabinet, and senior staff. Vice President Cheney and our National Security Advisor, Condoleezza Rice, are in a secure facility at the White House. I have just come from there. The Secretary of Transportation and other members of our White House senior staff are gathered at a command center there, and we are coordinating with other branches of our federal government. The Secretary of Defense remains at the Pentagon, and the Secretary of State is en route back to Washington from his trip to South America. President Bush is conducting a meeting of the National Security Council as we speak. They are meeting President Bush from his location and other members from different locations in Washington and other locations. As many of you have been reporting,
I'm staying. I don't want to add to a public hysteria that's going to cost lives. The panic we saw in Russia.
More than likely. Mr. President, we can discuss this on the way.
I'm not leaving.
We have to maintain a working government.
I want you to get the Vice President, the whole cabinet, and Joint Chiefs and take them to a secured location.
Being taken here. We are told there is a priority on trying to get the president back to the White House, but priority number 1 is the president's security.
President Dick Cheney and First Lady Laura Bush are in undisclosed secure locations tonight. Mrs. Bush is
I'm staying. I don't want to add to a public hysteria.
What has happened, Judy, despite the fact that from the ground up anyway, the White House complex, which you see behind me, the building itself and the old executive office building, which is home to a number of senior administration officials, a virtual ghost town, evacuated this morning. The president, as we have reported, is now at a military installation in the Midwest. The president, first from Florida, stopped at a military installation in Louisiana. He was briefed. Then there was talk that he would come back to Washington, and administration officials saying they believe that is politically very important to send a signal to get the president back to the White House as soon as possible. But the president instead stopped at a second military installation in Nebraska. We are told he is participating in a National Security Council meeting by telephone. Vice President Dick Cheney has been in the White House, underground in the White House Operations Center, the Situation Room, which is a fortified command and control structure, throughout the day with other national security officials, receiving information from around the country and directing U.S. operations from there. We do know on Air Force One en route from Louisiana to the Midwest, the president spoke to the mayor of New York and the governor of New York. He's been in constant contact with officials back here, including members of the congressional leadership, who also have been asked by their security to go to a secure bunker area built for just such a situation, a national security emergency in the United States. The leaders of Congress take